realignments are influenced by a blend of both natural events and human activity. And this realignment is marked by challenges such as pandemics, climate change, environmental degradation, which again interface with human-driven elements like the international terrorism, the digital revolution, and the influence of global financial institutions. On the other hand, there is a perpetual contestation between different actors, all pursuing their own interests, and this leads to tension, posturing, and sometimes create uncertainty in that region. So global security environment remains mainly characterized by volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And different countries and regions, each with a very unique capability and levels of preparedness, are responding in their own way to these different shifts in a varied ways. The quality of leadership, vision, and the ability to strategically plan is critical in making the determination on how effectively a region or this region can navigate these changes. In the Horn of Africa, where geopolitical and its geographical location and factors are deeply intertwined, this approach is particularly relevant. The region's response to these shifts is influenced both by its economic status, technological advancement, political stability, and socio-cultural dynamics. And these factors combined with the region's unique geographical features, it plays a very crucial role in shaping its current role in the geopolitical realignment and its prospects for future stability and development. So the Horn of Africa is predominantly situated on the eastern fringes of the African continent, extending into the Indian Ocean, encompassing Ethiopia, Somalia, Eritrea, and Djibouti. But the Horn of Africa definition is subject to interpretation, and still it conventionally includes the said states along with the contiguous territories of Kenya, Sudan, South Sudan, and by extension, Uganda. The combined population of all these countries is over about 300 million, and according to the World Bank, their aggregate economic output amounts to about 393 billion in nominal GDP. So the Horn of Africa is also strategically positioned for global actors seeking to project power across the African continent, power across the Red Sea, the Western Indian Ocean, and the Arabian Peninsula. These factors have made the Horn of Africa a center of global interest, attracting attention from major world powers and transnational corporations, especially in their quest for untapped natural resources. The diverse geography, with its mix of arid lands, fertile highlands, extensive coastlands, has significantly influenced the political and the socio-economic landscape of the Horn of Africa. This varied terrain has been a factor in the historical conflicts, affecting the socio-political stability, and additionally these geographical features in some cases have led to economic disparities and resource management challenges, contributing to the broader picture of regional security. Let me give you the historical perspective of the Horn of Africa. And I'll begin with the colonial period, during the Cold War, during the internal conflicts and the emergence of terrorism, and number 4, the political transformation and conflicts that currently exist in this region. The Horn of Africa's security landscape has evolved significantly over the decades, been shaped up by the historical events, by the geopolitical shifts, and the socioeconomic changes. This evolution can be traced back to the colonial era, which laid the foundation for many of the region's contemporary current challenges. As is well understood, during the colonial period, the European powers drew arbitrarily the borders of these countries in the Horn of Africa, often disregarding the ethnic and the cultural lines, leading to a legacy of territorial disputes that even currently exist, leading to ethnic tension. During the post-independence, these tensions often escalated into conflicts, and the newly formed states after independence had to grapple with the issues of national identity, governance, and resource allocation. During the Cold War era, further, it complicated the region's security dynamics. The Horn of Africa became an arena for proxy conflicts, with the Soviet Union and the United States supporting different factions and different regimes. This period saw a surge in the arms influx and military interventions, which fueled the current ongoing conflicts and instability. The end of the Cold War again brought new challenges. The vacuum left by the diminished superpower rivalry gave way to internal conflicts and the rise of non-state actors. Countries like Somalia witnessed the collapse of the state and the emergence of warlords, leading to a prolonged civil strife and humanitarian crisis. The rise of terrorism, most notably the emergence of Al-Shabaab in the Horn of Africa, added a new dimension to the region's security challenges, linking the Horn of Africa to global jihadist networks. Resource-based conflicts has also been prominent in the region's history. The effects of climate change have resulted to first and second order of effects in the form of struggle for diminishing resources such as water. And in the recent years, the Horn of Africa has witnessed a new wave of political transformation and conflict. The region has seen both the democratic advances and setbacks, with some countries like Kenya experiencing peaceful transition of power, while others facing coups and political unrest. Understanding this historical context, in my opinion, colleagues, is crucial in addressing the contemporary security challenges in the region. Let me come to the overview of the current security situation, and allow me to pick a few examples to explain myself. Regrettably, the region remains one of the hotspots for peace and security challenge in Africa. It seems it has seen a series of interstate wars and intrastate conflicts, some of which have serious humanitarian consequences. Yet political changes at the end of the 2010s gave rise to hopes for a transformative new trajectory towards democracy and stability. Let me pick Somalia. During the reign of Mohamed Abdullahi Mohamed known as Farmajo, who was elected president in 2017, there was cautious optimism by the international community and international observers who hoped that he would lead Somalia into a more stable direction and advance against the Islamist insurgents group of Al-Shabaab and move the country's democratization process forward. In 2018, again in Ethiopia, the Tigray Liberation Front-led coalition in Ethiopia was pressurized to a reform through public protest, paving way for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed paving way for Abiy Ahmed to become the prime minister. The new prime minister of Ethiopia then was welcomed by the international community. And in just a few months after his inauguration, he made peace with the long-term rival Eritrea. The groundbreaking agreement was lauded as a removal of a major destabilizing factor for the entire Horn of Africa. Sudan similarly entered into a historical transition in 2019 when Omar al-Bashir was ousted in a coup d'etat after a series of relentless protests by the citizens, causing many local and Western actors to again express hopes for a more democratic and stable region. In Ethiopia, however, optimism about the security situation in the Horn of Africa was brutally again shattered in November of 2020, when a civil war that's estimated to have resulted in around 600,000 deaths broke out between the Federal Democratic Government of Ethiopia and the Tigray People's Liberation Front in Ethiopia, Tigray's region. As we may be aware of the root causes of the conflicts can be traced to 2018, when Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's government embarked on a paradigm shift of political reforms, transitioning from an ethnocentric government to a citizen, all-inclusive model rooted in a concept that he called Medema, an Arabic word meaning coming together for synergy. However, these attempts aimed at political and ideological realignment were again disrupted by the resurgence of a conflict in North Ethiopia by the TPLF, who were discontented with the reforms that were being introduced by Prime Minister Abiy. TPLF was a hegemonic political party of Tigray that exercised immense influence over national-led decision-making over 3 decades, despite its minority status. In response, a coalition of the Ethiopian security forces launched an offensive, and according to findings by various sources, by the end of 2022, when a peace deal was signed in November of 2022, the conflict had a very serious, catastrophic human toll, estimated about 600,000 casualties, stemming from the violence associated with the warfare and the famine-induced conditions. Let me come to Somalia. In Somalia, the delayed elections, an attempt by Farmajo to extend his mandate, led the country to the brink of civil war in 2021. The internal political situation stabilized when the elections were finally held in May of 2022, and Hassan Sheikh Mohamud assumed the position of the president of Somalia. Suffice to say, Somalia is still marred in very complex conflict situation and unstable governance, with very little state institutions working. The non-state armed groups remain the primary threat to peace and security in Somalia and neighboring countries, particularly Kenya. In 2022, for example, at least 613 civilians were reported to have been killed in Somalia and 948 others injured. The Al-Shabaab group targets civilians and other agencies, including peacekeeping forces, through suicide bombings, assassinations, and armed assaults. Al-Shabaab also continues to engage in extortion and imposition of tax in the areas under their control in Somalia. They have displaced millions of people, exacerbated the humanitarian crisis, undermined the authority of the Somali government, and fostered an atmosphere of perpetual insecurity. Though relatively calm appears to prevail at the political level, the underlying tension persists between the federal government of Somalia and some of the member states. And further, there are developing tensions currently between Somalia and Ethiopia over the access to the port deal and naval bases on the MOU that they have signed, Ethiopia have signed with a region within Somalia called Somaliland. The federal government of Somalia has made some important gains to counter Al-Shabaab, and we must be ready to report where positive gains have been done. There has been a notable shift in strategy under President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, whose administration has been characterized by a very assertive Somali-led approach. Community engagement has been a very key enabler to government efforts, leading to a remarkable operational success. Bolstered by the backing of the African Transition Mission Forces, ATMIS, the Somali Security Forces has been launching comprehensive offensive, resulting in the security of the territories which were under the control of Al-Shabaab. ATMIS remains steadfast in adhering to its predetermined exit strategy, thus underscoring the commitment to Mogadishu's long-term reconstruction. Let me come to Sudan. In April 2023, fighting erupted between the Sudan Armed Forces and the Rapid Support Services, RSF. This conflict was sparked by a power struggle between military leaders, Lieutenant General Abdel Fattah al-Burhani of the Sudan Armed Forces and Lieutenant General Mohammed Hamdan of the RSF. The fighting has evolved into a war of survival, in my opinion. And according to 2023 Global Peace Index, Sudan occupied 155 position out of the 163 countries. The highlight of this significant challenge to peace and stability in the country is something that policymakers must always grapple with. There have been numerous diplomatic efforts, such as the United States Saudi-led ceasefire negotiations, the African Union attempt at an all-inclusive process, and by the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, IGAD. Unfortunately, none of these initiatives has so far made significant progress. The AU, which initially demonstrated proactive leadership by convening the permanent decision-making body and the international ministerial gathering while establishing a coordination platform, has encountered obstacles in assembling the core group and initiating the long-standing anticipated intra-Sudanese dialogue to unite the diverse civilian actors, bringing together a wider group to discuss the peace process of Sudan. Coming to Kenya, Kenya's security situation is multi-faced, reflecting both the domestic realities and its role as a regional anchor state in East Africa. Its security landscape presents a complex mix of challenges and progress. Geopolitically, Kenya finds itself grappling with a spillover of instability from neighboring countries, primarily Somalia, where Al-Shabaab militants remain a persistent threat to our stability. The long porous border facilitates between us and Somalia, facilitates the flow of arms and militants, posing a significant risk to Kenya's northeastern and the coastal areas. Kenya has also suffered numerous terrorist attacks due to its strong relationship with the West, particularly the United States. And a good example is the 1998 US embassy bombing in Nairobi, where 213 Kenyans were killed, several thousands injured, and more have been traumatized. Kenya has made notable strides in enhancing its counter-terrorism capabilities, collaboration with international partners, like the United States, improvements in the intelligence gathering and making strategic operations, which has disrupted numerous potential attacks in the current situation. Kenya continues to have a very robust democratic space driven by a very transformative constitution which was promulgated in 2010. Kenya exercises freedom of expression, has a very active civil society, has a respect for human rights, and is a strong proponent of the rule-based world order. Though a young democracy, only 60 years since independence, Kenya remains a pillar of democracy in the Horn of Africa. The security situation in South Sudan remains very fragile. Transitional government recommitted to the implementation of the 2018 peace agreement, known as the Revitalized Agreement on the Resolution of the Conflict in South Sudan. Some of the key pillars include developing a new constitution and holding elections by 2024. This process, however, continues to experience some challenges. Djibouti and Eritrea constitute relatively stable exceptions. Although Djibouti is experiencing irregular violent incidents involving rebel groups, and Eritrea has been heavily involved in the Tigray War. What are the key policy proposals that I want to put forward? Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, the following policy recommendations, in my honest opinion, may provide some solutions. In Ethiopia, the immediate focus must be mobilizing humanitarian assistance and reconstruction efforts in the conflict-affected areas. This involves collaborating with international bodies and NGOs to deliver food, medical aid, and essential services with international bodies and NGOs to do that in order to save the displaced individuals and the vulnerable groups. Concurrently, we must support the post-conflict reconstruction and rebuild the infrastructure and stimulate the economic recovery. Furthermore, we need to facilitate dialogue and reconciliation at all levels in Ethiopia, encouraging initiatives that foster inter-ethnic and community harmony. This includes engaging with the civil society, religious leaders to strengthen peace building and social cohesion. In the efforts to stabilize Somalia, we must go beyond the African Union Transmission Mission in Somalia, ATMIS, and mobilize international support. This involves redirecting funds to fortify peace and stability, assist in building independent governance institutions, and coordinate donor efforts to build long-term resilience with local civil society in peace building. In the complex landscape of Sudan peace process, it is very, very important and imperative that international development partners, alongside IGAD and the African Union, apply diplomatic pressure on the Rapid Support Forces and the Sudan Armed Forces leadership. Targeted sanctions and travel bans should be considered for those impeding the peace efforts. Furthermore, the establishment of an impartial, high-level international mediation entity is very crucial at this moment. The body backed by regional and global actors, including the United Nations, should be dedicated to facilitating a full-time peace mediation in Sudan. Equally important is the role of the neighboring countries, such as Ethiopia, Chad, Egypt, and South Sudan. Their involvement in coordination with organizations like UN, the EU, the AU, and IGAD is vital for regional stability and resolving the crisis. A comprehensive and inclusive peace process that brings together, that integrates the concerns and the goals of all the Sudanese stakeholders is essential. This involves building trust addressing the root causes of the conflict, and ensuring enforcement of agreements. In Kenya, we continue to play a central role in the regional efforts for finding lasting peace and stability. Kenya Defense Forces is involved in numerous peacekeeping and observer missions in Africa. Additionally, Kenya continues to play a pivotal role in driving diplomatic efforts aimed at realizing common position and goals, silencing the gangs, and improving humanitarian support to the affected population. Kenya supports multilateral efforts through regional organizations like the AU, the IGAD initiatives, like the frontline states engagement in the case of Somalia. In conclusion, the Horn of Africa stands at a very critical juncture. The Horn of Africa is facing a myriad of security challenges deeply rooted in history, from persistent internal conflicts in countries to cross-border disputes and political instability. The regional security landscape is multifaceted and is very intricate. These issues compounded by external factors and regional dynamics have significant implications for both the local and the global stability. Addressing these challenges require a multifaceted approach, enhancing regional cooperation and building capacity within the national security structures, which are essential steps towards more stable and secure Horn of Africa. Furthermore, addressing the root causes of insecurity, including the socio-economic disparities, governance issue is crucial for a long-term peace and development. The international community, colleagues, plays a vital role in supporting these efforts. In providing for this necessary aid and expertise, however, the primary responsibility lies with the African nations to forge a path towards peace and stability. They must be guided by the lessons from their shared history and driven by a commitment to secure a prosperous future for our region. Thank you very much. May God bless you. And this is my view on the security situation in the Horn of Africa in a shifting geopolitical landscape. Thank you very much. God bless you.